I have been doing this for a long time, 27 years in IT security and pushing 40 years in IT infrastructure and engineering. The thing that I noticed is there seems to be a repeating pattern where companies are failing, and they're failing for the same things. So it's like they're not reading the case studies that are published and saying, oh, maybe we need to not be doing this, or maybe we need to change how we're doing things to prevent the breach that happened. And when I started really early in my career, I had a security mentor that had 3 rules for security, and it was, the first 3 pillars in my talk. And over the years, I kind of applied those everywhere I went, and it was a success. I've had very few major instances. Everyone gets hit with something, but when you get hit, how fast can you recover, and how much damage did they do? But people would always criticize my 3 rules and say that's really too simplistic, and it's not taking into the full scope of security and engineering and protection. So I've kind of expanded that out to 9. So I like 3 sets of 3. My background started off in the military and doing real pen testing, like where you crawl through the grass and try to get through somebody's perimeter and you can get shot. Those same principles for security in that physical realm apply, and I've used a lot of those to apply into my career. And since then, I've worked in almost every vertical you can imagine. I've had government, healthcare, legal, manufacturing, sales, and then once I began working as a member of RedLegg, now I've touched just about every other vertical that exists. I've come with a lot of experience in this. Yeah, so I'm not big on reading bullet points. You can see them, everybody here can read, and so, I've kind of covered just kind of going over things that have happened over and over, looking at the principles behind IT security, mostly around engineering and management. We're not going to focus so much on tools. I will mention some that I think are good, but it's more about the holistic approach. Okay, so here's the 3 triad or tripods that I've got. You've got the foundational one, and then the 2 others that I came up with, the controls and then execution. Pillar number 1, this is the first one. Install only what you need. I got this lesson from a Linux, Unix admin, because back in the early 2000s, you'd have these pre-built options that you could do the lazy version of Linux install, and it would throw all kinds of libraries and applications and junk on there. Even if you said this is a server or a workstation, you hit server, you still got a bunch of garbage in there. And this will apply heavily. His argument for not doing that was the second one we'll get to. But the importance on this one is not just what applications and services you're running, but you want to think about, does the thing that I'm running need public access? So often people will sit there and say, hey, I want to put this on the internet because I've got, people that need to access this. Okay, why? Think about what you're doing. You're installing something and you're giving it exposure. NAT rules. If you want somebody to access a system or an application and you have a NAT rule that's inbound, make sure that you know what these are. We saw during monitoring excessive hits on an IP. It was failing because they couldn't log in, but somebody was attempting logins on a server from the outside. And I'm sitting there going, the only way you can do this is if there is a NAT rule allowing that traffic into the server. No, that was not exposed to the internet. I said, please check. And they went back, and sure enough, years before, there had been a server that needed remote desktop access, inbound. And they never removed the rule when the system retired. Know what's installed so that when you go to uninstall it, you can properly remove it. As far as applications, I'm a big fan of whitelisting. If you've got some sort of desktop or application control software, Carbon Black is a good one. and saying, hey, these are the only thing I allow in my environment. I had a nickname for those who remember the Seinfeld years. I was the network Nazi, because people were constantly telling me, hey, I want this program, and I just toned down. Why do you need it? If you can make a good business case for that software, then we will add it to the build package. Otherwise, you just are throwing more stuff in there that we have to watch, we have to worry about, and make sure that it's running safely. The last part of it in this one is knowing what the apps you have can do. I see so often people installing stuff and not having any idea of features that are in there that they're completely unaware of that are exploitable. And you can just turn them off, but they have no idea how to use the software. You get into a situation where you've got project, and you get the project done and immediately you're moving on to the next one. How much time do you have to look back at the previous ones and make sure that they're okay and babysit them and take care of feeding? Sometimes it's a good idea to have somebody who's an expert in that system to come and babysit that for you, so you don't have to waste your precious time on mundane tasks. You can do the cool stuff, the important stuff, improving your landscape, instead of just tweaking and monitoring stuff. Example, I've got a bunch of examples in here. The handout has examples. I tried to keep them as current as possible, but I've got a few more in that I threw into my notes. Move It, Breach. They had a secure file transfer tool that had a vulnerability. They got hit with that vulnerability, and they were able to get access to all their systems and do a lateral movement from that tool into everything. They had this tool in there, and it didn't need to be where it was. One of my military things is we constantly train in redundancy. I'll get a little bit into redundancy in there, but with these applications, rotating, I had a matrix of every system when I would run a department, and who was the primary, secondary, and tertiary. And then every 90 days, we would rotate. So you drop off being the primary support for whatever it was, and you drop down to the third level, and your second's now your first. It kept everybody on the team up to date and aware, and it kind of kept everybody honest, because if you weren't doing your job, and then when the guy behind you comes in, he's stepping in, you're leaving him a mess, and kept everybody on their toes. What's not inspected is not done, kind of thing, and that kept everything good. That's a suggestion, just a manpower management tool to ensure that the stuff that you have installed is properly maintained and supported, and that the engineers that are behind it know what they're doing with it. A lot of these things loop back around, and they're all intertwined. The next one, patch what you install. This is the #1 cause of incidents and breaches. When I was doing all my research for this, by a mile, almost 3 to 1, they just didn't patch their stuff, or they had outdated systems that were no longer supported. Please use some sort of tool to automate this. We're going to get into automation. Like I said, everything's going to be circular, everything's connected, but trying to patch systems manually is impossible. You can never keep up. So, make your life easy. I've got a few of them mentioned in here. Choose your flavor. Whatever you're good at. Reporting and compliance tracking. Our CISO would have a Wednesday morning meeting after Patch Tuesday, and we would run a vulnerability scan on the entire network. And there had better not be any critical or highs. It's like, so, because that was the most important thing. He wanted 0 critical and highs. His goal was to have 0 medium risk vulnerabilities. And we had to have a reason why there were any medium risk. Get a procedure in place so that you can make sure that your patching is done and that you can keep everything up to date. There's really no excuse for running a 2003 server today, yet I see them. The thing's been dead for years.
Well,
it's 20 2 years old.
There's so much manufacturing companies, and there's so many companies that don't even know. Like that's what I was saying about like it's hard. You can't turn it off because production will be down.
There's no excuse. We're gonna get into the excuses section at the end of this, and
So
there
many
is no excuse.
Yes, I mean me, Windows me maybe, but yeah.
If you're a boss, type into performance reviews. If you've got people who are responsible for this, that's a go no go on a checklist. Easy. Synovus, they're going to show up here a lot. They had outdated systems, unpatched systems, and the bad guys got in and just wreaked havoc, shut them down. They were down for weeks. We'll go back into them. They're in sustainability or reliability. Oh, and then of course the infamous Home Depot breach. This one had so many layers. It was like this is a case study on how to not run security. Their first mistake was their point of sale systems, those little credit cards, swipers. Yeah. They were running a stripped down version of Windows 98. That was like one of the most vulnerable OSs on the planet. The IT security team said, hey, we really need to get these upgraded. Second big error, the board and the senior leadership, the C-levels, hired a new CISO. No background check was done. The guy had been a security manager, engineers type, network guy, and was let go from his previous job and had maliciously done damage after leaving because we're going to get into access management a little bit later. They failed to control access to, for former employees. He had criminal charges pending when he was hired by Home Depot for criminal hacking. Wow. Yeah. As a CISO. He got hired as a CISO. And so the Home Depot was found guilty of neglect because they failed to do a background check. I know we've had some fun with RedLegg when we do our background checks, and we're going, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person actually applied for a job in the security company. But yeah, the security team told the new guy, hey, this is what we need to do, and he says, no, we're not doing anything because I get a bonus if we stay under our budget. A lot of them left. They would tell their family, don't buy anything at Home Depot, and it started rippling out through social media. They fixed their problem, but it was a huge black eye for the company. I found 7 major incidences in the last 5 years where companies just got hit because they didn't patch their stuff. This is kind of my favorite. You would think this wouldn't have to be explained to people, but if you don't have evidence of a breach, you don't know if you were breached. There's only one that I could find in my research where it actually happened because they didn't have logs, and it's in the case study, National Public Data. Almost 3 billion social security numbers and personal information for U.S. citizens was leaked. When they figured out months later that they had been hit, they had no idea how. They had no idea how much that they had lost without doing a huge investigation because they just chose not to log anything. I'm going to give a synopsis of my what do you log and why talk. Start with your critical systems, which are like your access control systems, your firewalls, your security tools. After that, you want to hit all of your application servers. Make sure you're getting the big 3, security, application, and system on all those servers. If you're a Linux world, get the messages log and the access log. But if you have web applications on there that are exposed to the internet, especially, get those web access logs too, because that will tell a lot about what somebody's trying to do. You're going to see those hacking attempts trying to disrupt, the web server and break the Big 10, that everybody says, hey, these are what you have to do to protect your website. After that, then you can start rolling in things like, and I used to not say this, get your workstations, your endpoints. I used to lean heavily on EDR systems, because if you have a good EDR system, it's going to tell you everything that's going on that's bad on each workstation. The problem is, going back to pillar number 1, people don't know how to use their EDR system and they don't set it up right. They have something there, they push the agents out, but they haven't got the rule set in to monitor for things that are bad. After that, you can start pulling in internal logs, custom built applications. It's always, everything's really, really helpful. The better you have, but here's the trick. It costs money. And this is one of the biggest obstacles to security is budget rules. You have a C-level organization that's trying to save money. You have, unfortunately, these people tying back to performance review for the managers of the security team. So they're going to try to cheap out. And you end up with a, what do I have to log to be safe? And that's a really dangerous tightrope to walk. You can get smart. There are a lot of logs in Windows and in other systems that are garbage. Fortunately, there are, most good log collection systems have filters that you can set and say, hey, I need these event IDs. I'm only concerned with these. These are the hot ones. And we've got a Windows audit log recommendation of what you should be logging. Yeah, please do not use the default Windows logging, group policy settings. It doesn't do anything. You get that much. You probably should have about this much. If you want that, reach out to us. We'll be glad to send you that document that tells you what you should be setting up, and it has a nice breakdown of what each event ID is and why it's important to log those. You can't hunt for something if you don't have anything to hunt through, so this one is kind of basic. Missed logs that commonly are not logged. I have a lot of people think that application logs on Windows servers aren't important. And so they only, and security, or not security, system.
Okay.
So they're only concerned with the security logs. But things that are important in the system logs and the application logs are, did somebody shut down the server? You'll never know that from security. It doesn't log there. When applications are modified or changed, or changes are done to the system, that doesn't go in the security log typically. There's an event that somebody exercised their security rights, but what happened is lost. Other ones that are critical, here's a good one, external DNS logs. I highly recommend using something like, Cisco changed the name of it, but the external DNS servers that actually provide some protection and feedback on, hey, this is a known bad website, and we're not going to allow that DNS service to go through, but you also want to get that log so that you know that you've got users, for one reason or other, attempting to go to a ransomware download site or a file sharing site or, anything. Yes, there is insider threat. You do have people who are not team players. And they get stupid ideas. I actually have one story. We had a guy who worked at a place who had a dead man switch on all of the servers, that if he didn't go through and reset it, it would go and delete all the, it was really bad. It was a bad script. It wouldn't have worked. But he left, and all of a sudden I start noticing that there's weird errors are popping up on systems. And I go and look, and where's the origin? I find out, what the heck is this? And it was tied to his account. Of course, as soon as he left, we had killed his access. So his account had no access to do the deed, but even then it wouldn't have worked. But it was that petty, childish, if they ever fire me, they'll be sorry kind of mentality. And it's just like, there are things you don't want to log. I got this directly from VMware. Don't send your VMware host logs to a very expensive log collection system. They're useless. The only people who care about those logs are VMware engineers from the support side, so that when there's something wrong with your server, you can call them and they can look at those and say, oh yeah, this is what's wrong with the server and this is what it's going to take to fix it. No value whatsoever to anybody else in your organization, especially security, because it's gibberish. But they're super noisy and they would be expensive to store that. Okay, move to the next triad or 3 pillars. We'll go into this one's super important, access management. This is a huge monster. The person in the back row has an entire company dedicated to this goal. That's all they do, and they do a lot of it, and people need this. One of the things to watch out for is scope creep or rights creep. You hire person A, they get job, and then they do their job really well, and they move to a different position. Now they need other access. And people will go, oh, well, we give you that access to this. And then I've seen people bounce around to like 10 different positions in the company. And pretty soon they had access to everything in the company, but they don't need it. You need to make sure that you purge and prune previous rights. I've seen a few companies that do this well. The place I was, we just basically sent them out to base 0 and then rebuilt their account rights for that new position. There are software tools out there that'll do this for you, but maybe they're not the bad guy, the person who is looking, they love the company, but they click on that wrong email or they click on that, go to that wrong website, and suddenly your entire organization is locked down with ransomware because they had access to everything. This is not one of my strengths. This is something I know about, I know how to do it, but most importantly, I know get the right people to help you do it right, because this is becoming so complex now with multi-factor, with cloud services, and too many different things moving out there. You've got silos of authentication rights and access controls that you have to unify and control. It's a big beast. And expecting one person to be an expert in everything. Security is like as big as just saying IT. What do you do in IT? I work with computers. Oh yeah, okay. That's oversimplifying it. So get the right help in setting this up. I will say the one thing I do know is if you're not using multi-factor on everything, you're setting yourself up to be hurt. I will throw RSA under the bus on this one. Basically, the Jell-O Band-Aid Kleenex version of multi-factor got breached because they weren't using multi-factor internally. It's their freaking product. And they were using it for like getting in on the VPN and things like that. But when you logged in, you weren't required to have a second validation. And they had a lot of other problems. They had no segmentation. Once you got in, you had access to everything. It was like really bad. And of course, people got the keys to their authentication system, which is horrible. But it was one of those facepalm moments where RSA got breached and they lost the keys to the kingdom because they weren't using their own product in-house. Case study for this one, Change Healthcare. Again, they had a portal, public internet access with no multi-factor. Somebody got a hold of credentials, they got in, they had access to public healthcare records, PII, all that publication information. It was bad.
I have a question on the logging for the access management. So are those good logs, like Delinea logs or SailPoint, Savient? Are those logs good logs to put in there?
Yeah, anything access management, access control, especially around management. Mm-hmm. And but you want to get make sure you know when somebody's logging in and what they logged into. If you can get
logging, is like with the timestamp of what's happening logging in.
Yeah, but also the change control. If something gets changed, you can, was that something that's supposed to happen? And watching for that. One of our noisiest alarms is admin rights modified, or somebody added to an admin group, or somebody given privilege escalation. Yes, it's noisy. It's 99% of the time false or true positive or benign positive. But it's the one time that it isn't. And I can go into this wasn't really a rights escalation, but perfect time for a Chris story use case. We had monitoring. One of our alerts is admin deletes multiple objects. So a large amount of data or actions taken to remove data in a very short amount of time. And the alert fired. I was on call. The analyst who got it said, hey, this looks really bad, I need you. And I get on there and I go, yeah, stuff's bad, let's call the client, let's get them on the phone. The issue was that they had a very large IT department and had laid off like 30 people They did not do access management control and change all the passwords for anything that any of those people may have had. The other fail was they were not logging everything. There was in one small satellite office a Cisco ASA, which had VPN access rights by default. And this bad actor, this IT guy who got fired or laid off, was backdoored into that VPN, using the local account. And from there logged into the systems using a service account password for an application that he managed. Third big fail, that service account was in the domain admin group. Totally unnecessary escalation of privileges. There's no reason why you should have a service account with that kind of right. If you're just being lazy. We'll get to that at the end when I sum up excuses. Well, it's easier to just make it a domain admin, then it can do whatever it wants. Yes, and so can the guy who abuses that password. So he went through and in vengeance started deleting every single account in AD for the IT team. And that's what triggered our alarm that we noticed was we're seeing a lot of alerts. Well, fortunately, they were able to get in and stop the damage before it was too bad. Using what we could, we tracked it back, and then I said, what is this IP? This is where he authenticated from. They go, we don't know. And then finally they realized, oh my gosh, there was a firewall for this site, and we didn't have the logs for it. And we would have noticed that somebody had just attempted to log in with a non-standard account. We saved the day. It could have been worse because everybody knows you delete an account in AD, it's gone forever, and you now have to rebuild everything from scratch. And yeah, it's an ugly thing. Tabletop and testing. So this is, you got to practice your emergency procedures. You can get audits, you can get pen tests, you can do all these things and they'll tell you, and you can go through and try to fix all the things that they find. But the one thing you have to know how to do is, hey, what happens when the lights go out? Does everybody know their job? These are essential. I hate doing them because they feel like such a waste of time because you're getting in a conference room for a day or two and you're going through all of these scenarios and you're saying, how would you handle this? And then you've got to remember, and it's not something we all want to happen, and we're so busy, but it's essential that you take time out to do these things. You have to have a plan. The case study on this one from earlier this year, Long Island School, they got breached, they got wiped out. They had no disaster plan. They had no idea what to do. Everybody was panicked, and it took weeks before they got their systems back up and the kids could get access to information and the school was running back in normally. We help with that. Yeah. We've got the advisory team that can come in and help set up and work with, in addition to testing, pen testing and doing audits and things like that. Sitting down and going through and help developing the plan, the emergency. Hey, Brett Glass, we need to do things, and everybody needs to know their job.
Yeah, and something else to add, like with the twig you're saying, though, I've been around those tapes, like they literally are tabletops, like a circle. Like you bring everyone that if something bad happens, same thing with ownership. Like the backups don't work. Who owns it? Who's gonna raise your hand? And no one raise your hand, that's the problem. You need to say that's my job. So it's just it's basic stuff of knowing whose job it is, what bad things. You won't even know the bad thing that really will happen. This is just an example of what could happen, but it's just
if you don't know, if you don't have a plan, you're behind the power curve when you start. A couple of other, besides Long Island, Target, when they got nailed back in 2013, nobody knew what to do. But this is one I have a lot of experience with. And a funny story, back when HIPAA became a thing, one of the HIPAA policies, you can't send personal health care data in an email. They felt that that was unsecure. So we spent a lot of money getting devices that had secure communication and said, okay, this is how we're going to transmit orders and updates for the staff that's out on the road. Unfortunately, we had people who didn't want to change. Before, they had been using a pager system that would email to a pager what they wanted, and trying to get people in healthcare to change is like pulling teeth. I was concerned about it, and I went to the chief compliance officer and said, hey, there's this really cool product for less than $60,000. We can get it in, and we can enforce the policy. It can watch for keywords. It can watch for, search the database for our patient records, patient IDs, anything like that. And if it sees it, it can flag it and send it to compliance for approval or disapproval. We don't need that. We have a policy for it, is what she told me.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong. And this was the most disgusting thing I've ever had to do in all my time in IT. Everybody sees when you log in that little warning that says, this system is the property of, you are subject to monitoring at any time, blah, blah, blah. We had that on there. I went to the CEO and I said, I'm going to execute that warning. And his only requirement was, please tell me when you're doing it. I said, as long as you don't tell anybody else. So my boss, the CIO, and I, we set up the mail system to funnel a copy of everything in and out into a separate mailbox. And we spent 2 days going through 1 day of email. And I learned things about my coworkers I did not want to know. But we ended up having 34,000 HIPAA policy violations in 1 day. The field staff refused to use the new system. Instead, they were still sending everything via email because the devices we gave the nurses, and they could also get emails. So they were just emailing them this stuff. And it would have, go visit patient John Brown, administer 2 milligrams of morphine for this diagnosis. I said, yeah, that's 100% what HIPAA's trying to prevent. Like I said, a paper tiger has no teeth. And you cannot just rely on, we built a policy, we've educated people on the policy, trust that they're going to follow it. You have to have something in place that enforces or at least monitors that so that you can identify where the risk is. A couple of 23andMe, they had a policy in place for users, and they blamed the users for when they got breached. Yet it's that EULA, they blamed users for their breach because they weren't going by that thing that's like the Bible that everybody says they read but they didn't. We're going to get into the last 3 here. Now, automation is a really nebulous one. It's very important. It doesn't really apply to anything other than better ways to do what you've already got. And goes back to pillar number 1, knowing what you've got and how can I use it most effectively. Can I automate processes in there? Can I streamline what it's telling me? If you had to manually go through, this is like the SIM is why a SIM is such a valuable tool. The SIM is not an endpoint detection system. It's not an antivirus system. It isn't there to look for the latest exploit. What it's there is to look at all the logs that we talked about in rule number 2 that come in and find anomalies in there or help you identify where something bad has happened very, very quickly. If you had to go searching through independent systems and looking for things and picking up a breadcrumb trail, you'd never get anything done. Other things, you have use cases in your alert systems or internally, playbooks on if X happens, what are my, so you can bring new analysts in or new technicians in who don't have a lot of experience and quickly give them, these are the steps to do when this happens, and you can resolve things quickly and easily. SOAR is a perfect tool for that. A lot of those things can be automated and done for you so that your analyst team sits there and gets the alert or the attack, and they can just press a button and go, yep, I've identified, this is what it is. They hit a button and everything happens automatically. Painful stories around this one. We were talking about how tools now are using AI. AI is a great force multiplier, great automation tool. It can easily streamline the identification of threats and tell you what's going on. It's pretty good at identifying, yeah, this is a bad thing and this is why it's bad. And this manager tells me and goes, no, AI, I don't trust it, it's useless, it's just a bunch of rules. And I'm thinking to myself, that's like saying that Michelangelo's David is just a rock, or the Mona Lisa is just a bunch of paint. It's very, very advanced, it's very complex, and it just made me think of, yeah, and that's like, the cloud will never work, don't trust the cloud, and now we're all using cloud-based computing. Before that, VMs are garbage. Why would I want to put multiple computers on one computer instead of just buying more computers? Change is painful, and people are resistant to change. I had a boss that told me, he says, we don't change until the pain of changing is less than the pain of not changing. And sometimes we have to learn through pain. But AI it's here, it's happening. Companies are leveraging it. Take advantage of it. Get smart, educate yourself on it if you haven't, on how best you can leverage it to automate your life and make it easier for you. Otherwise, something's going to get messed up. This was a hard one for case studies because it was like multiple places where it could have happened, but some smart system that automated things and made things more streamlined would have made it better. Evolve Bank, they basically had RDP protocols exposed where if they had automated processes to decommission systems and back out accesses to it, even if it's just a playbook, hey, a checklist. Are there any open ports that are allowing access to this? And they could shut that down. Capital One, misconfigured rules. If you automate those role configurations, like I said earlier, in the access management, you get consistent results.
There's something also in identity access management, you were mentioning that part on the other slide too, which is part of identity of joining with belief or automation with IDPs and into like it's so hard because so many logs. So just automating provisioning, deprovisioning, people moving and overprivilege, that kind of thing, over automating that join in with the lever cycle, and then that way, like, you have to go to the workflow, you have to have that going, then you can actually have this and be smarter if you're doing better. Those automations are there. They're like, there's free things to do with the workflow defined. Now, Microsoft said things are changing. Microsoft Entra, there's a lot of the things that are happening that are, you can create that workflow with automation, and then for that, and again, to be smarter. So I just on the identity side, how it's so complicated, but it could be easier with automation.
Yeah. Yes, in case you guys couldn't hear what she was saying, it's just like there are workflows and automations in these systems that are there to be taken advantage of. And my experience is most people don't know that they're there, and that goes back to number one. Yeah. Only install what you need and know how to run it. Here's one that recently I learned. I'm not an expert in Entra authentication in Azure. And thanks to Laura's company, I learned something really, really useful. If you have, is it E5 licensing? Yeah, if E5 licensing, you have AI in Entra that will identify this user is logging in from an IP they've never logged in from before. And they will give you what they call risky sign-in alerts. You can train that. In that alert, there's a URL that if you click on it, it takes you right to that alert, gives you all the detail that the AI, what made it, determined why was a risky sign-in. And if you say, no, this was okay, you get 3 options up at the top. There's a red, yellow, and green button. Red is, this is bad, keep telling me about these. Yellow is, this was okay this one time, but keep telling me about these. And green is, no, this is the user's job and I expect this. And it will stop telling you about those. And it makes the cry wolf effect way better. If you've got that, use it. And I was on with the client. They said that we had no idea that this even existed. And they were frustrated with how many true positive, not dangerous, risky sign-ins that were coming in. And it helped them a lot. Resilience. This is back where I started. And yes, shit will break. Plan on it. And this goes back into the tabletop discussion. But before you can have a tabletop, you have to have a plan in place to make things resilient. And this is one of the more frustrating stories. I had a new CIO. First week on the job, he took all the directors off-site, and he says, I have a plan. In 90 days, we're going to kill the power in the data center. And I don't want anything to stop working. And I completely shut down for the rest of that workshop because my brain is starting going, because that's my job. And I'm thinking, how the fuck am I going to do that? Like that? And I ought to just give him my resignation right now because there's no way we can pull that off in 90 days. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, what if he throws the power and it doesn't matter because nothing's here? And so I came up with a real brilliant plan for resilience. I'm from the Phoenix area, and every major business has their servers in a data center in Phoenix because we don't have earthquakes or hurricanes or tornadoes or snowstorms or ice storms or anything. The only thing we have is hot. And we've dealt with that. And there are so many data centers pockmarked around the greater Phoenix area. They call it the Silicon Valley. And I thought, what if we put our entire server room down there? Now we've got redundant power, we've got battery backup, we've got redundant feeds for network from different carriers and at different locations. And we move this hub of all of our computing out of the corporate headquarters someplace else, and we treat the corporate headquarters just like one of our field sites. So he said, that's a great idea. Put together a proposal, build it out, and we'll do a presentation to the rest of the senior executive management. And I did my best. I worked so hard and learned so much about how building, had a cool slide deck and, what people think a disaster is and what it really is. And our biggest threats were backup bomb and a fire. The server room in the big office building we were in was 2 floors up from a restaurant that had already had 3 fires. And I desperately wanted to get out of that building. We got done, and I had calculated, I worked with finance and found goodwill cost of, and how much downtime it would cost if we caught on fire and we lost everything. And I'd done a complete disaster recovery scenario. And I got done, and the president of the company looked at me and goes, I can get insurance to cover that. We're not changing anything, and it's cheaper. And I go, yep, but I just said that would be months where all of our data is gone and our patient care would be bad. If non-existent, we have no paper records for any of our patient data. And I ran into the reality of American business, and that's painful. I'll get to that in the excuses section again. Ransomware drills ties back into the tabletop exercises. What do you do when everything gets locked down? Ransomware used to be honorable. It was horrible, but you pay them and they give you the keys and you can unlock. Then people started locking your stuff, taking your money, and just walking away and leaving you. So now nobody's paying anymore. And you just have to count on IT having good backups and having systems in place to get stuff up quickly. Monitoring metrics. This is where it all kind of comes together. If you aren't watching it, you don't know it happened. It's where, hey, are you patching things? And, having metrics around vulnerability list and, the once a month, hey, we just did a scan following Patch Tuesday and explain to me why we have so many mediums. They should be gone. That rolled back in there. This is where our company shines, and this is what I like the most. This is what we do. We set up monitoring. We have rules that look for anomalous behavior. We look for the big hitters, and we have people sitting there 24/7 watching that. One of my colleagues, the manager of the SOC, he takes a great deal of pride in that metric. Hey, we saw it within X amount of time. We were on it, and we had notified you that this was a bad thing this quickly. It's that time to detect and then time to resolve. It really, with the shorter you make that window, the easier job it becomes. If you don't know, you like the case study here, Ticketmaster, when they got breached 1.3 terabytes of data with credit card information. They didn't know for weeks. The one that was earlier, the Synovus, they got breached. They didn't know for months. When you get that far down the line, you have problems where the attacker has been living in your house for weeks or months, and they can do anything you want. The big shocker for me was, anybody remember the data exfil from Sony?
Yeah.
Back when they had that stupid movie with Seth Rogen and North Korea hacked them, and it was in the petabytes of data that they had exfilled. How you can have petabytes of data moving out of your network and not notice was mind-blowing to me. I had a situation Thanksgiving Day. I got a call from my network guy because we had network monitoring. He says, "Chris, something's wrong. Our internet pipe is saturated, and I don't know why." So I came into the office, he came into the office, and we tracked it down to a workstation in IT development. And the guy had a file sharing platform and had bootlegs of 5 or 6 current release movies that just came out over Thanksgiving that he had gotten bootlegs of. And those file share platforms, if you don't tell it to throttle to a certain bandwidth, they see and will send people to the fastest one. And here we had a T3 pipe. There must have been 100 people sucking these movies down. Needless to say, the guy lost his job. But that monitoring allowed us to immediately, because my network guy had tools in there to let him know the network bandwidth is reaching over 80%. And that threw a red flag. He got me involved, and we were able to identify what the root cause was. We shut off the laptop and stopped it. A couple of other ones, we had Ticketmaster, Metabank. They had alerts that were generating, they weren't acted on. Yeah, Target, even after they had access control problems, they got data stolen, they did not even know this until months had gone by. That brings up, I hate that Target gets such a black eye about that credit card theft from the POS systems. The first one that got hit was Neiman Marcus. And they got hit before Target did and didn't tell anybody, or they didn't know, which is worse. I don't, But after Target came up and said they found it weeks or almost a month after it had happened, they said, "Hey, we've been breached and there have been millions of credit cards stolen from our systems, and we need to notify all of the users." me and Marcus goes, oh yeah, oh we got hit by that too, you know. But then when they did the forensics, they had actually been hit months before. They were the trial run of that software, and then they hit target with it. Again, we'll get some more of that in the excuses section. Last one's Capita. They had a regulator come in after an incident. They found that they had been ignoring their security alerts. And it happens. I don't know whether it's you're too busy, you don't care, or what, but it just, unfortunately, this is, you know, there's real world experience that I've had with companies to do that. Let's run through some of the excuses of why we don't do these things. We're too small, we're not a target. Everybody's a target. If you're out there, you're a target. The Long Island School District, which is one of my examples in this, is not a big target. They're not a Fortune 500 company. They still got hit with that ransomware. There's no target too small. There's people who just do things they like to watch the world burn. They'll hit anybody they can hit because it's mostly bots looking for targets, and then they just go after it. We don't have time to patch. Well, if you don't have time to patch, when are you going to find time for a breach? And that is like the worst excuse. This is your job. I don't have time to do my job. I had a guy in the Army one time. He told me, I don't have the money to drive to work. And I said, well, we can fix that. We can just make you not have work, you know? That way you don't have to drive anywhere. It's one of those things that, it's like, so you passed an audit, passed a pen test. Don't think that you're invincible right now. It's a constant process. Yeah, we passed an audit back in May. Yeah, have you patched anything since then? We're compliant, so we're secure. That's another one that goes back to that audit. We got audited and we passed it. We passed an audit. An audit doesn't prove anything. This is also one of my pet peeves between blue team and red team. I think pen testers get off easy. You guys familiar with the blue-red designations? Yes. I spent my entire career on the blue side. And it's one of those where pen testers get all the glory. They get to go to Black Hat, Con, and get up on stage and talk about, I found this company, I popped them, watch it. And this is my really jaded opinion of pen testers. Hi, I'm going to do a penetration test. I'm going to throw everything I got in the kitchen sink, and if one thing sticks, I win. You suck. Pay me. I throw everything at you, nothing sticks. I couldn't get in. You rock. Pay me. Meanwhile, the guy on the other side, me, 10,000 things come bouncing off of me. One thing sticks. I suck. I failed. And it's never ending. It's a constant grind. That guy goes off and goes and talks at Black Hat. I just sit there quietly suffering through, what am I missing? What am I, worried about next? And so yeah, you gotta keep a constant vigilance. You gotta keep up on it. It's a never-ending, thankless, grueling job. We've never had a breach before. Everybody's heard the it's not if, but when. Everyone will have an incident. I think that I have done an exemplary job in my 27 years doing security, that I can count on one hand the number of incidents that I've had, and all of them were minor, and we were able to remediate them quickly. But there's been 4 or 5 of them, and they were sphincter clenching when they were happening. And fortunately, if you've done all of the prep work that we've talked about, you're ready for it. It still sucks. It's the vendor's fault. That's a blame game. I don't want to take responsibility that my security is poor, my training of my users is bad, and the vendor that's responsible for monitoring is my scapegoat. Or the platform I'm using got breached because there was a vulnerability and the vendor should have had a better system. Or they should have patched it sooner before they knew that there was a breach because they're precognitive, you know. That's a lame excuse. This is the real one. And I'll go back to my disaster recovery, you know, letdown. We don't have the budget for that. Unfortunately, this is the reality of what we do. If your senior management doesn't value their company reputation, their clients, and the data that they have and have been entrusted with, maybe this isn't a good job to have. There are companies out there that care about the security of their data and their clients' privacy. Try to find those. If you get constantly up against the wall, no, we're not paying for that, but we need this. It's like the earlier, the compliance thing. We don't need a tool that costs $60,000 to protect patient data going out in email. We have a policy for that. Yeah, the policy costs nada. This is $60,000, but I just proved to you that we had over 30,000 violations, and each one of those was $25,000 fine if we got audited by the government. So which costs more? And that's what you have to use. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, cost. How much is it going to cost you if we don't do it? Kind of thing. Our users will never fall for that. Yes, they will. We'll fix it after the audit. Really? If you know about it, fix it. That's just a lame. That's. I'm going to summarize these into 3 things. When we get done, I like 3s. That's the security team problem. Like the VP that told me, hey, if I get a virus, it's not my problem, it's yours. You know, like, yeah, that's one thing. Okay, so I was thinking about these things today, and there's 3 things that those excuses roll up as. There's incompetence, and you guys familiar with the Peter Principle? You can Google it. It's basically a summary that everyone who does a good job gets promoted to a higher position. You continue to be promoted to a higher position until you do a bad job, which means all management is on its way to incompetence. This guy did a study, and it's true. And I can tell you in, you know, the 60 years of life that I have lived, it happens. You get managers out there who they don't know what they're doing. They're completely lost. I mentioned the CIO that I had, that he was a business analyst. He had no background in development, in infrastructure, in security, or anything. He was put in charge because he had a master's degree. And he was a hot mess. But yeah, the incompetence of senior management, not realizing what it takes to secure in the environment. The next one is ignorance, and it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Hey, guess we with that one. Yeah. Okay, the Dunning-Kruger Club. The first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is you don't know you're in the Dunning-Kruger Club. So Dunning-Kruger effect is when you know enough to think you know something, but you don't know enough to know what you don't know. So therefore, you believe you're an expert when you're completely clueless about the pitfalls. And so you're going along. It kind of also falls into a little bit in the incompetence area, but ignorance, not knowing what needs to be done, that can be fixed. There's training. You can get people to help you. You can go and read constantly. And the last one is the worst, it's apathy. It's, I don't care. Yeah, I should do these things. I can go to these seminars, I can read the handouts. And these are the things that you should try to do, and you got it. Don't get distracted by the flashy sales pitches. Everybody gets spun up around the latest buzzword, coolest thing. you can do all of these principles. Yes, there's software and tools behind them. Like I said, I wanted to make this completely platform independent. Choose the thing that you like, choose the thing that you know, and know it well, and use it well, and do it well. And, but that's the quickest way to create a problem, because you're changing, now you're ignorant of what can be done, and you have a learning curve to go through. Sometimes it's better to stay with what you know. What keeps you up at night? And if things don't keep you up at night about your job, you're falling into that apathy zone. And you should be constantly saying, hey, how can I do the job better? Where are we missing? It's one of those things like automation. Yeah, if you can get a tool that automates your patching, and it does it for you, great. If you're going to rely on, Windows Update to do it for you, that's automation, sort of. You say, hey, go out and get your own patches and patch yourself. But if you're not doing that self-check, if you're not running a vulnerability scan and saying, hey, what is it patched? What's still vulnerable? Then you're missing something. Yeah, you don't necessarily, automate. It makes your life easier. But then also validate. Okay, totally random if you take nothing else from this. Today I learned, anybody know why gold is yellow and why it's not silver like all other metals? Gold has one electron in its outer valence shell, which means it should be super reactive, like sodium, all those over there on the far left side of the periodic table. But it's not. And so I started researching that. I learned that all of the chemistry I took in high school 40 some odd years ago and the chemistry I took in college gets thrown completely out the window when you get past xenon on the periodic table. Because quantum relativity, Einstein kicks in. You have so many electrons and they're spinning so fast in those inner shell, power level shells, that they're getting close to the speed of light and their mass is increasing, which blew my mind because everything I learned in high school and college is electrons have no mass. Yes, they do. And when they get close to 90% of the speed of light, they get heavy, which is why gold is heavy. Heavier than it should be for its size. Because their mass is increasing, they're causing all of the electron shells to squeeze in. And that one little free electron that's spinning around there cuddles in with the inner power shells and says, nope, I'm not going anywhere, I'm hanging out with these guys. But here's the tricky part. The gravitational pull created by those electrons is so great that when light hits it and bounces off, the longer, slower wavelengths can't escape. So the blue, green, purple don't, and you get the red, yellow, which gives us that orangey gold color. I mean, you see it.
Didn't know that.
So you learned something today.